Well, thank you, Artis, for that wonderful introduction and your kind words. When I first made the decision to come to the Valley to launch this business, Third Street Center was the first place I landed. And they were having a festival there, and I started meeting people, and I met Rita Marsh, who brought me into Davina Kent and started teaching me about what this organization was trying to accomplish. And I thought it was so amazing. And I felt if I had not been so immersed in my own research and my business and trying to understand the problem I was trying to solve, that would be a place I'd be hanging out a whole lot of my time. And so I'm really thrilled to be here today to talk about what I'm doing to people who appreciate Davina Kent. Also, my mission within this business absolutely aligns with what Davina Kent is trying to do, and that is looking at the balance in life and having addressing all aspects in this wholeness of our life experience. And from our point of view and our experience, we see that finances touch every aspect of our lives. And so to only keep it to numbers and spreadsheets and such sets people up for problems, and especially people who do not relate to typical budgeting formats, models. So the tendency might be to avoid that and to struggle and feel like something is wrong with me, that I cannot manage these simple tasks of finances. And that gets complicated as you add trying to launch a business, and where you need to track and a whole nother aspect of finances. So I wanted to start there in talking about my connection and relationship to Davina Kent. I've found in the Valley there are a number of very open residents here, as well as business people who are looking at filling a niche and growing some kind of concept and willing to network. And that is something too I want to make myself available to in this community. It's one of the reasons I chose to launch the business from here rather than in Indiana, where the conception of this business was happened. Is I felt there was a lot more support here. And to start off, our goal in Bedrock is to empower individuals to make decisions for themselves and improve their financial situation. Now, sometimes that gets pigeonholed into you have more wealth, you have more stability, but that's not really how we look at it. We look at it from the individual's point of view, and we come to understand from their point of view what is stabilizing. And when we start achieving that for the individual, with the individual, we start seeing their financial wellness improve. Now, what that means is really up to the individual. Some are looking at their numbers, and when they have savings, they feel more stable. Others, that's not the priority. So we can't just say, if we check all these boxes, this person is stable and is well. So we really have to start with the individual. For a lot of people, talking about their finances is really scary. It's something that's kept very private. Fear of not knowing things and being able to master them can be such a problem. Today, preparing for this, I was very afraid. I am so excited to be here. I love the mission and the people at Davina Kent. I love what I do, and I love talking about what I do and bringing that to the world. And at the same time, I'm afraid to share my ideas. I'm afraid, in my startup business and in my own personal financial matters, that I'm messing it up. It may or may not look like that from the outside, because I'm keeping those things private. I don't have perspective because I'm keeping it in my head. And, I have all sorts of unfounded ideas that support that fear. And often I'm not even aware of the fear. I just seem to avoid certain things, or I develop workarounds, maybe a banking system in my head, or I put things off I really want to do, because to do it, I would have to look close at my finances. And I'm afraid. I don't know what I'm thinking I'm going to find or what's going to be a problem, but, I'm just so unsure. And that can be crippling. I don't always look like I'm afraid. And matter of fact, I do a lot of things like moving 1,000 miles away to start up a business in an area that I'm not super familiar with, or a way of living I'm not super familiar with, because I was trusting, my instincts on this. And but none of that fit traditional models that I should do this, and then launch this business. I definitely approached this from a very different point of view. And, when, I think about, people who have huge financial problems or extenuating circumstances, like a medical crisis, or having an addiction, or having somebody you love struggling with life, or an addiction, or something that is creating huge financial turmoil, or things like a pandemic, or social unrest that we're experiencing this week. What these kind of situations can start pushing, solutions out of reach, or it seems that way. And, or, maybe you've tried different formats, like apps like Mint, or, seminars such as David Ramsey, to see how can I get myself in order. There's got to be a way for me to figure out how to move towards my goals, or to even know what my goals are. And what we did is we stepped back and we looked at the problems people were facing finding financial stability, from people that were really, their landscape was just like a war zone, and it seemed like there was no way to recover from it, to, professionals who make plenty of money, and on the surface they look like they're managing okay, but they are feeling a lot of stress, not knowing what they're supposed to do. They just they read things, they do things, they check boxes, but they just feel like they don't connect to their financial situation, and started to examine, why didn't these traditional models work? What is the problem here for people? And what we discovered is that, first of all, that a lot of people experience that kind of the square peg into a round hole, that they were trying to force fit themselves into these models, and they couldn't sustain them. That it wasn't responsive to how they saw the world. And rather than seeing that the model was the problem, a lot of times they would internalize it, and this would be my case. There's something wrong with me. I'm not smart enough. I can't figure it out. I can't keep it up. I'm not disciplined. It's for some reason, it doesn't seem so simple as, money in, is more than money out. How do I deal with my life as it's showing up? It is not this really spreadsheet looking life. The other thing that we noticed is, and these two are close in hand, is, you know, first we have the individual who, hang on one second, move. I'm trying to shrink my screen here, but I'm having some trouble with that. Okay. So what I was saying is we have the individual that we know that finance impacts every aspect of our life. There's really not a part of our life money is not attached to in some way, you know, where we have, you know, have to have money to support our hobbies. We have to have money, or money's somehow involved in our, you know, maybe our religious or spiritual endeavors. That money seems to be everywhere. And so to not address that, if our finances aren't stable, that we might not see imbalances in these other parts of our life, is problematic. To say I'm going to apply this model to this individual and not understand their whole life is problematic, or not have that being introduced to the discussions of decisions being made around finances. And then the other thing is that the one size fits all, we lose perspective. And we start thinking there's something wrong with us. We start experiencing maybe shame. So we get private and we feel isolated, and then we don't know who to talk to. Or maybe we think there's some secret code for understanding how to follow a budget. Like, some people seem to get it. What is wrong with me? Why don't I get that? We've also learned that there has to be support, and there has to be a human element to this support that holds space for someone as they lay out, sort out what's going on in their finances, and someone nearby as they're walking through it. We believe that this is true both in personal and business, especially small business finances. So, and in that, when we're working with people, that support isn't as an expert telling the person what to do. It is, you know, there are times where someone will ask for direction on something, and we consult best practices for that. But we don't assume the role of telling people what to do. We support them as they come to understand. We support them so they are empowered to come to understand their own ideas of what their financial picture should be. And then the last thing we noted is a safe space. A lot of financial matters are riddled with judgment, what you should or should not spend your money on. If you're trying to save, they will tell you what you should spend your money on. And this is a destabilizing element we've discovered, is that each person knows what things stabilizes them in particular points in time. It's not something that's constant necessarily. So we address what is going on right now. We create the space for right now, and that person starts making the choices of what are the most stabilizing factors they need to pay attention to. And we build month to month on that. And that is how a lot of our clients walk their way through the most troubling times to the most stabilizing. So the solution we came to all that is roomy and all-inclusive. It is the creation of a space for people to discover what matters to them. We keep some of the positive elements of traditional budgeting in our process, but only in support of the individual personal journey. So in that, each person that comes to us, our process is somewhat structured, but as the person presents themselves, the process is responsive to them. Sometimes it leads to budgeting, and sometimes it leads to, consultations on what are the next and most important steps they need to take. And so they just might need time to sort through their ideas and understanding what matters most. It may never evolve to a budget. So, that us being responsive and individualizing the parts that are necessary, most important. And then we have all sorts of formats that allow for routine structure to be put in place for that individual. Through the process of weekly check-ins and monthly planning is we meet people where they are. We don't ask them to come and be prepared and meet us and provide information. We meet them and we come to understand where they're at, and we start from that point. We have a judgment-free zone, so we do not have any opinions about the information they're presenting to us. So with that helps create that safe space. We put the person in the position of being the decision maker, offering only best practices when they ask for direction. And we provide and create tools that support the way the person understands their finances to build stability and resilience in their life, not just their financial landscape, but for their life. And we move at the pace the person sets. Now, sometimes this can sound like getting into a therapeutic space. And although what we do sometimes is therapeutic for people, it is not the objective of what we do in our process. When issues present themselves that demand some sort of expertise, we work with the person to identify who that expert would be for them, and then they proceed to go delve deeper with someone with those skill sets. We're looking at the overall structure for that person and the plan they're building for their financial situation. Okay. So now I'd like to walk you guys through what our process is like. And I'm going to share the screen with you. Artists, it is not letting me share the screen. If you want to check on my permission to do that.
Does it work now?
There it goes. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Hang on one second. Hmm. Okay. go. Seeing that okay? All right, good. So we call this the bedrock process. And if any of you are interested in taking notes, that'd be great. If you have questions along the way, go ahead and send them in the chat. I might not see them until a little further on, but I certainly will circle back around on all the questions. So the first part of what we do is generally getting to know the person. It's just a few minutes, really. People usually come pretty prepared in their mind of the stuff that's bothering them. It takes it takes some effort to step forward and say, I'm going to work on these things. I need some other eyes on it. And what we usually do is just talk a little bit, and I'll start to get to know the person and what matters to them, how they see their financial skills, what have been some of the troubles they've had as far as, either not having enough information or, sticking with it, or just feeling overwhelmed by a particular financial aspect, their debt or, their business expanding, whatever it is that they're struggling with. We just kind of get just an overview. What are the things pressing the most? And or just even knowing, where are you from? How long have you lived here? Where do you work? That kind of thing. So then we'll start the next phase. And in this part, I'm sharing this, empowering people to make decisions for themselves, but it's written on a sticky note. And this is an important part of what happens coming up, is as we start talking more specifically, going through this exercise of understanding what their financial responsibilities are. This is a way of kind of gathering information that you would input into a budget. And we structured it so it can help people kind of focus on and jog their memory about what their expenses are, what their assets are, that type of thing. And to keep them relaxed, we write them down on the sticky note with the Sharpie pen. So they'll look kind of like this. And we'll start with the first category, and we'll say, define what it is. And we're gonna say, okay, this is income. It's pretty straightforward, but it could be other things too. It's anything that represents money. So it could be if you're getting food stamps, it could be, somebody covers your cell phone bill for you. It could be that you have money that comes from royalties from some sort of asset that you have, or it could be that, from a trust fund. It could be all over the gamut, but really what we want to know, and we'll then show examples of those types of things. And as someone says, well, I have a job and I bring in X amount of dollars, I'm writing this down. Everything we're doing at this point, we're only thinking about what's coming up in the next month. And we try and gather this as we go along. And we reassure people at this point, it doesn't have to be super precise or exact. If they think of something as we go along, we're going to add it in. And usually as people are talking and looking at this, they're sharing too what kind of problems they've had, what kind of stressors, even successes they've had, just generally sharing in this realm. And we'll collect that information too. We then go to bills, which are regularly paid bills, things that would show up at the same time every month type of thing. So this kind of puts them in the part of their brain where they say, well, I've got my electric bill, I've got my rent, I have a mortgage payment, those kinds of things. And we give them examples to help jog their memory about what these things might be. And as we're doing this, we're not usually collecting the amount. Sometimes people will tell us that it's $900 a month, and we'll put that down. We don't want to get them all caught up in numbers. We just want to kind of general idea of what these items are and keep it relaxed. The expenses are the things that are more variable, that kind of happen, one-off. I like to go out to eat. I get groceries. I have gas for my car. It might be things that just depends on the week, how much I might spend. And these are examples people have given us on these types of things. Then we go to debt. And here we focus on formal debt, like a car loan, a mortgage, to all the way to the informal, which I owe my sister $25. My friend treated me to dinner and they don't expect me to pay them for that, but I want to pay them. So the real informal, even whether it's an expectation from somebody that it be repaid, or you feel an expectation. And these are examples of debt that people have expressed to us. And of course, this doesn't cover everything, but this does give an opportunity for people to think about what's going on in their world. And without there being a huge demand of being super precise or going through bank accounts and tracking every detail. We just want to get a general idea. Then we address taxes and legal. Of course, these could be debts as well. Let me see. And here's examples of these, but we don't care if there was overlap. We don't care that somebody might repeat something. We're just trying to get all the information we can from this short exercise. Assets are anything, of course, that people own a value that could be liquidated for cash. Quite often people get concerned about sharing this because they think that they're going to have to sell it. And like that might be the point of this exercise, and it's not. It's to show it's to show the landscape, and that first of all, we might not recognize some of the things that are assets when we think we have nothing. We do have some things, or we overvalue or undervalue what it is we have. And so this is just getting a more accurate, clear picture of our whole financial picture. And assets, we also point out, here are the examples, that possessions of value are things that, for example, if you thought, oh, I could sell my car, but you need a car to get to work, then that's not helpful. But someone might choose to, in order to meet their goals, in order to achieve the things they want to, they might decide to downsize their car because the car is not important to them and they'd like to use that equity to move it towards the things that matter to them. So getting some sort of understanding around this is really important for that person. And then the other is, we usually say, is there anything we've missed that haven't been covered in these categories, and or anything that gets in the way, makes you feel bad about your financial picture? And here are some of the examples the reason we included this category, because people talked about things that were in, things that were hanging over their head for one reason or another. And I'm sure this category is much bigger for, examples of things that get in the way of people coming to understand their whole financial picture and their ability to move beyond it. The next step in this process is what we call the wall. And the reason it's called the wall is because we created a budget model to take all these items we've now collected and put into this budget model. And rather than using something like a spreadsheet, we took and created this big model on the wall that these sticky notes could be put on and moved around as the person started thinking about this model and how they they wanted to respond to it. And let me see here. This is one of the models. This is a makeshift one. Typically, we're using blue poster board on the wall, but we needed to pop this up for a client. And so we just used blue tape and our titles. And so it's similar in that we have a category for income. We have a category that's like necessities or essentials. And then we have category for something that would be like discretionary spending that you would have in a budget, what I owe and what I own. And so we're playing off that typical budgeting model, but we've added categories and we've redefined the categories as well. And I'm going to explain these categories to you here. At the beginning of our model is first steps. And this isn't usually where we start when we do this exercise. This is usually what we go to after we complete the exercise. And this is used every month to lay out what are the next steps. So what do I have to do to get started? And after somebody sees all their finances up on this or plugged into this model, they usually know right away, well, I need to go do this. I need to do this, right now. And so we'll start creating a list of steps for them, what they need to do. And this is where we start each month when we review the month. And then income is obvious. We're tracking, as the person's talking, the things that stand out and are hard for them as stressors. And we identify those for the person because they don't they don't realize how that might be interfering with their ability to follow through on the things that matter most to them. And so we start tracking that and kind of pulling it out of the conversation of money and keeping that separate. This category is what stabilizes me is what would be the essentials or necessities category. We've redefined this one, and it's really one of the two most important categories in the model. Is we start shifting to not what do you think you're supposed to do here, what are the things that really stabilize you. And so as we hand them the sticky notes that have all their expenses listed on them, they're going to start evaluating them for starting at this point. What stabilizes you? For some people, their ski pass is the most important thing that keeps them going every day, every week. If they're on the mountain, they know they can go to work and be happy about it. And they know they can face whatever is going on in their world. If someone looked at this budget and said, you're kidding me. A ski pass, you've got debt, you have this, you shouldn't be doing that, you have kids, you shouldn't be doing that. When we remove that individual then is now going to work stressed, preoccupied. They're not thinking clearly. It puts them in a position of destabilizing their work situation, which puts them in a position if they lose hours or lose that job, they're not paying anybody for anything. When we look at the number and say that ski pass costs this much per week, maybe $50 a week, I don't know if that's even close to a right number. And I see that keeps that person stable within their life, as well as their quality of life is greatly improved. It's a significant stabilizer. It's an investment in this person moving to a stable life and financial wellness for them. That's how we start in our here at Bedrock is we look from the position of that person. What matters to you most? Where do you see yourself going? What matters to you? Usually I start that example with Starbucks because it's usually the first thing that's criticized in someone's life. Starbucks, cigarettes is usually one. Going to movies as opposed to just watching what's free or renting Redbox or something else. But Starbucks is a great example. I get up in the morning, I get myself ready because I have to hit Starbucks on the way in. I see the same people at the counter, either customers or people who work there. We have pleasant exchanges. I go into work. I arrive ahead of time at my usual time, and I'm good to go, and I feel great. Eliminating that step because I can make my own coffee for 63 cents at home. I get out of bed and I'm dealing only with myself. There's nothing bigger than me going on that's making me get out the door. I'm skipping all that interaction and I'm arriving to work whenever I arrive. And it gets harder and harder to arrive on time. So now that $30 a week seems really important for the quality of this person's life, their interactions with people, and the fact that their bills are now, subject to destabilizing because somebody said you shouldn't be buying Starbucks. So creating that space where someone can really say, yeah, that I've got to have that right now. Until something becomes more important to them than the Starbucks has to stay. And for some people, they put that at the top of the list. It's ahead of their rent. It's ahead of their, car insurance, their car payment, like child support. It has nothing to do with whether or not they value any of those other things. They're trying to stabilize and understand what things they're using in their life to stabilize. And that's where we identify that here. We have the what I own and what I owe. So those are two different slides there. They look real similar. If you don't know, I'm changing them. And these are obvious. This is the debt and assets. So we track that and we keep that in the center of the budget to remind people how they're changing and shifting to a more stable place. And then the what makes me happy is the category that's the second most important category. This is typically discretionary spending. We quantify this when we're talking to people about where they're going to put their expenses. Is this the stuff that you could do without for a little while if your money was tight? So if you had to cut, we could cut here, but you would want to figure out how you're going to change that, because cutting here for too long destabilizes people. If you think about it, you should be saving for your car insurance payment that's coming due, but you haven't been able to go out for weeks and you're saving and saving, and pretty soon you justify going away for the weekend instead of that, and using that money and figuring out later how you're going to pay that insurance bill. We can't go without too long in these categories because these are things that stabilize too. We're just more resilient to do without them for a short period of time. So everything that's going in this budget is important, and we treat it like that. We're saying to the people who we work with, what matters to you really does matter. So once it all gets put out there and onto the budget, we're asking, okay, we're going to ask for the numbers. We're going to put the numbers in, and we're going to say, okay, this is how much is going out. This is how much you have going in. You either cut the amount of stuff going out, or we figure out how to bring more in. Whatever it is that you need to do, that's where we're going to start spending our time. And that's where we're going to help you understand what changes you can make to make that happen. This last category, can't deal with it yet, is also one of our top important categories. Sometimes there's something so huge in our minds that we cannot even get past it to start getting busy building our lives the way we want them to be. So if it might be, I have a huge student loan. It might be I have so much debt. I'm new into recovery from addiction that I can't even face it. I'm so embarrassed. I can't even deal with it. We're going to say, okay, that doesn't have to be the showstopper. Let's put it here. Anything you just can't deal with. And matter of fact, when we do this in person, this sign is away from the whole model. It'll be on the other side of the room. So it's not in view. Because that's what we're saying. We're saying it's okay. We're going to tell you, instead of you have to face your loan first, your debt first, we're going to say, if you can't deal with that, we're going to just put it on this page and get it out of view, and let's start working on the other stuff. And when you're ready, you let us know. We'll bring it into view. We'll bring it into the model. And there have been times where this isn't even actually always like something like a bill or debt or something. It could be things like, one person said his divorce, and he couldn't stop talking about it. When we put it on this, it was out of his view, and he could start talking about other things. And eventually, by the time we finished our session, he just threw it away. He said, it's over. The divorce has been over. Everything is done. There's nothing I have to do with that, but that's all he could think about before. So just having this way to separate from things has been really helpful for people in our budget model. I want to talk a little bit more too about how people show up in our budget model. So this is one example of someone we were filling out the sticky notes, and they decided where everything should go. It can look like this. It can even be less notes than that are here. And then it can be something like this. And this is only one page, what stabilizes me. And it can be full. Like I'm off the page, on the walls, sticking them all around. Almost every one of this person's pages had this many notes on it. So it can be very, it's all about the individual. Some categorize it and it's very few. Some just have very few expenses right now. This person had a business. She had everything combined. And so there were a lot on here. And this wasn't everything. When we meet, we're only trying to get this general view and to get somebody started. And as the month goes on, we add more detail. As the months go by, we add more detail. If that person's still working with us, we just keep adding the detail for them as it appears. So it doesn't really matter that you have to get every receipt in order, collect every dime you're spending in order to understand your budget and to understand what matters to you. Each month we focus on what matters for that month. We don't have to know everything that's happened in the past or everything you think might happen in the future. It's really trying to get a handle on understanding the things that matter most. So your time, energy, and resources are going to those things, not going to things that don't really matter to you. And for us, the process of fitting ourselves into models and checking boxes, I own a house, I own a car, what really matters to you? What are the things that matter to you? Are you being served by the way you're spending your money? And we can't define that. It's up to the individual to discern that and decide that for themselves. We just provide that space for them to do that. Okay. I haven't been able to see chat, so if you have any questions, feel free to submit them into the chat box. Okay, so what we'll do from that point is we will take the information from that wall and we input it into a digital wall. And I will share that for you. So this makes it something that the person can refer to on their own. This is what we come back to every month. Sometimes people request that we do the actual wall exercise again, where they are putting sticky notes to the wall, because there's something about seeing that visual and taking and putting that information in that way that has been profoundly impactful for people. In this period of COVID, we've used Zoom and me putting the sticky notes on the wall for the people, and that has worked well. Or people who are not in the area. We work with people all over the country. But we then take all that information and we put it on we call it a Trello wall. And so it's set up the same way. You can see where steps, income stressors. Sometimes people will choose to add goals. This is just a sample of a wall. This isn't an actual client. But you can see how it lines up and how we track this. This becomes very personalized to what matters to that person. As we go along, we're able to move off, these lists to an accomplished list. So they now have a sense of they're moving forward and accomplishing things. So this is part of what we'll do every month to review what happened the last month. What do you want to have happen this month? And we start trying to get their view from being reactive to forward thinking. The other thing we create typically, but not always for every client, is hang on one moment. No. Is a budget format. So this does fall into a spreadsheet, but what it does, and people use this to very different degrees. Some, it's seeing the budget in a different way like this that is helpful for them, and they can see it broken out by week, what the totals are, what it is for the whole month, the total. For some people, we start planning and tracking. We set up, we call them building funds, and we start tracking that, setting money aside in their account for future goals. We have a week-to-week breakout where they can see what's been paid and what money has gone out, what money is coming in. And then there's a log that they can use to just put all the information in, and it'll populate that weekly overview and the building funds. For probably 90% of the people we work with, they'll end up with a budget format like this that they'll use. As I mentioned before, for some people, they're working through getting clarity on a particular direction, a path that they're taking in their life, and they may or may not use this. They may be only using that time, those weekly check-ins, to be looking at their next steps and what they're trying to accomplish specifically. In my experience so far in studying the problems around finding financial stability, whether it is individuals who are in financial peril, if it's family members who have loved ones who are financially unstable, and which puts an undue duress on the family, and they're seeking us out to help them with that. Or it's, individuals with a small business or wanting to start a small business, and it feels overwhelming, and they are trying to figure out, how do I move from where I'm at to where I want to go? Our process has been very effective in working with people like this. And on our side of it, it is incredibly rewarding to be holding space for people as they're walking through understanding themselves and where they want to go. Most people in short time, within a few months, are expressing feeling freedom in their lives, that rather than being reactive or not knowing exactly what they're supposed to do, that they understand for themselves what matters, and that they are now planning and forward thinking in their finances. That shift creates freedom for them, that they're not carrying this burden around with them any longer. Is just, tremendous to hear. It's tremendous to see. And on our part of it, we're trying to create as much ease with the process, so it is not time consuming or cost prohibitive for our clients, and that we can scale up on this and bring this to more and more people, regardless of where they're located. So those are our future plans for now. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Okay, I have one question here. Can you speak to how someone might grow through this process financially and where they might end up as a result of doing this work, stability-wise? So I can speak to this. I think that usually when we're speaking to people that are feeling financially stressed, it usually means that either they're carrying more debt than they want to, they're paying late fees, or might have overdraft fees because they're not necessarily because they don't have money, but because they're not paying attention to their finances closely enough. They're overwhelmed, and this is usually the result of that. For the most part, people that are feeling that financial overwhelm, even if they're not experiencing a financial impact as a result of it, they can't speak to where they are financially at all. So they tend to think that they just got to stay put where they're at. So they're not moving towards the things that matter to them. They just are stagnant. So usually what we see is when they come in is it takes that first month of becoming aware and understanding their whole financial situation. A lot of it plays out in a month's time. Bills are due, things need to be tended to in that month's time. Usually in that month's time, there's that awareness happens. The second month is usually when changes start to happen. And in the third month, people are usually asking to start moving towards things they've been avoiding. So if they haven't looked at their credit scores, if they haven't looked at their debt, if they might want to address a debt they have with a family member, something like that. And that's usually what we see. A number of our clients have stayed with us. It's been about, I think the longest standing client is about 20 months now, because they keep working on to the next thing. It's very motivating. So we usually see the stability start happening in around the third month, and the changes happening at that point and it growing from there. Did that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? We could also take questions after the recording is done. Okay. I turn it back to you, Artis.
Thank you very much, Maureen. I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and then we can open mic if people have questions specific to kind of what's going on right at the moment. That might be helpful. So let me stop the recording.